The BigDesign component library enables you to create an admin interface that looks and feels like BigCommerce's own admin, which is great. And I mentioned it a couple of times before. Today, I want to show you right in the weeds of React, how to customize it and create your own version of components while still trying to keep in keeping with the rest of the BigDesign library. I feel like I'm ready. I have all of my BigCommerce swag. I have my BigCommerce hoodie, my BigCommerce sunglasses with bottle openers on, and my BigCommerce spork, as well as my daughter's dinosaur. So we should be ready. So I'm going to go through how we're going to create an search autocomplete component. The recent update to BigDesign gave you a search component, which I will kind of take you through, and then all the way through to building it into an actual product search. So you can build that into any of your admin areas where you might need to enable the user to search for products and then act on a product selection. So yeah, I have no idea how this is going to go. Very rough and ready. Roll tape. Hey everyone. Today I wanted to do a follow along with Tom sort of technical episodes where we're going to be sharing a lot more about working on my second app for BigCommerce, which is a visual merchandiser app. And so here you can kind of just going to dive in really quickly. Here you can see we're in a category page. We pinned some products that we want to be shown at the top of the category, and we can drag and drop and reorder them. But I want to add a search box to this page, so you can search and quickly pin new products if you might have very large categories. Gratefully, BigDesign, the React design system and component library, has just had another update which included this search box, so I can quickly pull out onto the page. I've been able to very quickly kind of integrate that so that when you type in a search here, say hat, I'm then showing the search results. The component itself is just the input and the search button, and then I was kind of seeing if I could create some sort of autocomplete and show products. So I was initially pretty happy with that, but then once I started getting into it, realizing that it's a good first version, but there are some limitations. So some things that I noticed straight away is the way that I built it. There's no sort of on blur event, so when you click outside the box doesn't disappear, and that's kind of I've raised an issue with BigDesign, and that if you do want to customize the way that this search component works, it's very much sort of a first version for what they've done so far. It's more meant for filtering sort of a table of results rather than autocomplete. So I noticed that it was going to be a bit of an issue to resolve, and then once you get into it, kind of look into accessibility. There's a little bit of accessibility built in, but from reading up, there's a lot I don't know. So I'd much rather use a sort of a dependency that I know is going to build out an autocomplete box well from an accessibility point of view. So even things like keyboard control. That I know I'm going to need something like that. So I feel like that was good for a first version, but what I want to take you through now is going on to actually build it a little bit more how BigCommerce might. So for their select component, going into BigDesign, they have they have select, which is almost what we want. We want our list, but we don't want kind of the right-hand toggle. We want to have a button instead. And so they use downshift, which is a popular library for building component boxes, or they have combo boxes as they're called. So yeah, I'm going to take you through kind of what I'm doing here. So this was the first version, was kind of nice. Liking the fact I could quickly use the box and panel and shadow styling from the BigDesign library. But now we're going to switch it out and go into the deep end with downshift and useComboBox hook. Okay, then for my next step, I was looking through BigDesign and how they implemented the select box and how they used downshift and used the ComboBox component or hook of downshift. And that was good for inspiration. But after reading the downshift library, I felt like actually probably the best first next step is actually to follow the tutorial, learn the library a little bit better, and start with a sort of more basic version of the tutorial, and then kind of build up the sort of BigCommerce layer on top from a UI perspective. I took pretty much exactly the basic usage example here and dropped it into my search autocomplete component, which I'll take you through in a second. But very quickly recognize that it was functional. So we have the, obviously it's very basic styling, but we have hover over for mouse. We have sort of on blur disappearing. We have keyboard controls and selection. So obviously it doesn't look as nice anymore. But very quickly recognize that this is going to work. It's got the functionality we want out of the box, leaving us just to worry about kind of integrating it in terms of knowing when a particular option has been chosen and making it look nicer, adding that BigDesign component to it, or layer to it. So then the tutorial, the tutorial is almost just copy and pasted. All I needed to do was, when kind of instantiating ComboBox, I needed to make sure that it passed when the input value changes, pass that back up to kind of my the parent component, and even the onSelected I'm not really doing anything with. I was just testing it out. And then this middle bit is essentially lifted from the tutorial. You have your label right now. We have a div with our input in, the button for toggling the drop down, and then the list of results, which is simply just sort of mapped through. And I think I've done a one-line change really to remove some styles to make it even more basic, and say that we want to show the product name in the results, and that's all we're showing right now. So very, very basic version. Kind of know we've been able to move this over to the downshift. Next up, I want to figure out how to start adding back in the different BigDesign components. Can I add it to make it look like an input box? I think that's what I'm going to try next. Okay, so I got the BigDesign input element in. That was like a fairly easy change. Just swapping out the regular old input for a BigDesign input. But then I actually decided that I quite liked the chevron icon on the right hand side for opening and closing the menu. So if you have performed a search and then have chosen to kind of get rid of it, obviously forgive the work in progress styling, but that's actually quite a nice feature, and from a UX perspective is then sort of consistent with the select. But the problem I've run into now is that, as you see, it's much bigger than you expect, and that's because from the BigDesign component library, they do provide or they do set a certain amount of restrictions so that you can't sort of mess up the styling, understandably. So I can't customize this button as it stands to make it smaller. So yeah, I'm going to look into how I might solve that. Okay, it wasn't pretty. The route I've gone for is composition over inheritance when it comes to React. I've essentially copy and pasted everything I need so that out of BigDesign component library of a button component to be able to customize the styles. So albeit that the drop down is changing the width of the input box, we now can open and close the window with the arrow. It's the right color, it's the right size, and code wise, this needs a lot of cleanup, and it's certainly not ideal from a point of view of kind of efficiency. So the route you have to go is copy and pasting. I'm afraid to say it. So style button, all of the button definitions are currently at the top of this file, and then we get into our search component. So yeah, there's about 200 lines, 250 odd lines that I've essentially copied and pasted, sort of the inner workings of the button component to be able to modify the styles. So yeah, I guess from this year has really been my first year learning React. It's a trade-off, closing down your design systems so that people can't kind of shoot themselves in the foot. But if there are ways in which people can adjust it, then there's certainly advantages to avoiding this sort of situation where I've got duplicated code. So yeah, I can see the benefits, but certainly experience the trade-offs now as well. This can obviously be cleaned up so it's not all in one file. I'll do that in due course. Next, I imagine adding in the button is going to be fairly simple in terms of just making it look like a search box. So I'll probably do that and then move on to the drop down itself and making that actually look and feel like the select box drop down. So yeah, let's see how we go. So lucky for you, this has only been a couple of seconds. For me, it's taken me a good couple of hours to progress to the next step, getting kind of in deep with ripping out the parts that I wanted from the BigDesign library to build out a list and list items for the autocomplete box. Immediately you can see I've done a few other sort of minor style changes as well, adding icons and things to make it look a bit more like a search box. But we're back to our position of being able to enter a search term, and now we have our new list and list items, which are very, very similar to the select list items drop down. And we are showing our products, product name, product SKU, and image there. So I'm really, really happy with that. We've got the hover effect as there with mouse, as well as being able to navigate up and down with keyboard. So very happy with that. Then we have right now I've got a version of on click or on enter, and we're just indicating, you can see here with the alert box, we're getting the information that we expect. The problem I have now is, well, in the next step for me to programming, isn't it? Everything is a problem. On to the next one. So this currently, because it's a combo box, it's a select box by default, and that's what it's optimized for. I've had to do a little bit of jiggery pokery in terms of it wants to choose one of these items and update the input box. So kind of very quickly going into code, this is my search autocomplete component, and one of the things you can do is provide a stringified version of your item where my item is a product. So you might say that I could do item.name to show the name. Once you've selected it, the search field is updated to be the product name. But actually, I really want it to stay as it is. So right now, sort of my way of doing that is just making sure that we always kind of keep the search term. So value here is search term. So because I feel like that's a better user experience. You don't want your search term to change just because you've chosen a product. You might want to may change your selection. So that's fair enough. But the next challenge I've got is the combo box is all around handling selection changes, and that works in the first instance where I choose, say, the black mug. But you can see that I didn't get an alert the second time around because the item selection hasn't actually changed. So what you would expect in a drop down is when you're choosing the same item as you've already selected, it shouldn't do anything. It should just close the menu. So in that instance, it's working as expected. So almost like the final change here, before actually sort of integrating it with the pinned items functionality on the page, is to make sure that I know whenever an item is chosen, even if that means that it hasn't been changed, if that makes sense. So not just on the, like right now, I know when an item is first selected. I want to know when it's second selected, so that I know that I can sort of repeat actions and repeatedly choose products. So that's my next challenge to look into. I don't know there's much else I want to pull out. There was quite a lot from the BigDesign library that I've sort of copied and pasted to try and make as kind of identical as possible, an experience as possible, and keep the code similar. So we have our top level kind of search autocomplete box, which manages opening and closing the menu, and rendering the items in a popper, sort of flyover, the drop down itself into a list, and we have our list component, which handles rendering the items themselves. So nothing too strenuous there. It mainly, as I say, taking the select item component and stripping it back a little bit, because obviously that does a lot more power multi-select and things like that as well. So our use case is a bit simpler. That's my next challenge. I feel like we're very much on the home straight now, and then we'll have a really nice looking search box. I have gotten to the next stage where I can put in my search term, get my list of results, and then when I click on an item with mouse or keyboard, I've actually integrated it with the grid as well. So if I click on an item that isn't pinned yet, bottom one, it becomes pinned, and I can click on it again, and it becomes unpinned. So I'm really happy with this search box now. Decided to update the search button to open and close and be kind of have the same functionality as the toggle. And you might have also noticed I've got the loading indicator when it's actually performing a search as well. So yeah, that's yeah, dead chuffed. I think it's fair to say. I'm sure there's plenty to do to tidy this code up, but things to point out. Search autocomplete. So this is my top level component for which uses the combo box. So something to call out, if I can find the right tab, is that there are a bunch of event handlers that you can hook into for when certain things happen. So enter on the input box. So if you've got a highlighted index and you hit enter, then it will select that item, and then also click on an item. So those are the two real sort of on selection events that occur on an event handler level. So I decided to hook in with those because going back through this documentation, there are sort of like on selection item changes, which we've sort of already listed. Wasn't going to be good enough for us because we also want to know when an item is clicked, but it wasn't. It was already selected. On state change, I had a look into, and gives you an awful lot of opportunity to hook into the various events that happen. But again, because the state isn't really changing at that point internally in ComboBox, that wasn't going to be suitable. So I went a little bit lower level and went down to the events. So on here, the BigDesign already has a on key down custom handler that it passes to the input field, already doing some work in terms of opening and closing the menu when you hit enter. If it isn't already open, I've hooked into that, so you get the highlighted index if there is one, and so I should probably do a little check there to see whether or not that is going to be an error and that array index doesn't exist, but it passes that item, so that product, to the function that I pass into search autocomplete. Then, so that's for when the input field, when you're manually selecting a highlighted item with the enter key and kind of the arrow keys going up and down them. Then I pass the same function all the way down to list item, and use that same function on a list item click. So when you actually click on with a mouse, the same event occurs. So that leaves me sort of at a top level. I've got my product search component, which uses search autocomplete. One other thing I've done here is pull out the actual sort of item render to a prop as well, so that I can pass in this product micro row, so I can have like complete customizability outside of the search autocomplete component, what the actual how to render the item information. So yeah, so maybe I'll do some cleaning up of these edge cases to make sure I don't ever get any kind of out of bounds errors and things. But yeah, I'm pretty happy here, and I've probably spent long enough. I should move on to something else. But yeah, happy with how it's going. I'll go into a bit more detail in terms of what visual merchandiser it is and what's coming in another video. So this is something a bit different. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll speak to you soon.